listening to Paul and Fiona here on Saturday Magazine, here, Joy 94.9. Macca's off today, but you've got the A-team in supporting you. And Fiona, we've got our next guest in the studio.
Yes, we're really excited to welcome Isabelle McGovern, Mind Australia's acting LGBTIQA+ suicide strategic development lead. That is quite a long introduction. And Amy Corcoran is one of the aftercare peer practitioners, both from Mind Australia. We really appreciate you both coming into the studio today to tell us all about Mind Aftercare. Now, there is good. It's a very serious subject, but there is good news because you have received some significant new funding in the lead up to National Suicide Week and National Suicide Day. Welcome to the show, Amy and Isabelle.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about Mind Australia, a little bit about the extra funding. So it's come out of the recent Royal Commission, and maybe give us a little bit of background about the organisation.
Yeah, sure. So Mind Australia is a mental health organisation. We serve people all around Australia. And aftercare comes underneath the auspices of Mind. So we provide LGBTIQ specific suicide care. So we are able to give our community a particular kind of solidarity that comes with our lived experience. And we're really glad that we've got funding for another year. It's not. It's been a recommendation in the Royal Commission that an LGBTIQ aftercare service is provided, but my understanding is that's underway with co-design at the moment. So we'll see what happens, but for the time being, we're able to provide wonderful, brilliant care to our community thanks to peer workers like Amy.
So, Amy, one of your, it's because of your opportunity to share your lived experience with people, for people who have concerns. Tell us a little bit more about how you decided to get involved as a peer worker.
Well, I found actually that I went into the field of psychology and studying those things, and then found the peer workforce was still emerging when I finished, and my first role was in a peer support role. And I just remember the sheer joy of being like, my experience is useful here. My experience is a qualification. What I have been through can support other people in that same way. And there's something incredibly unique and beautiful about working as a peer practitioner or in any kind of lived experience role, being able to draw on what you've been through, which can feel so isolating at times, to support someone else who may also feel isolated or have never met someone who's been through that same experience. So once I started that, once I learned about that power of peer work and peer practitioner, I couldn't see myself supporting from any other modality. It's a really beautiful way to sit in solidarity with someone.
So do you begin the process when people reach out to the organisation? Now, of course, there's the opportunity for much more face-to-face work. How does that work? Do you find that it's what's the steps that people would go to be involved in Mind Australia?
Yeah, so if people are looking to be part of the Mind Australia Aftercare program, there's referral forms online and people can complete that themselves, and I'll let Izzy give a few more details about how to access that. But people, at the moment, there's real flexibility in terms of how the service is being delivered. So for some people, that's coming and visiting in person with us. We're based at Abbotsford. For some people, it might be going for a walk or going out to a queer space or queer community and being able to be part of that, exploring that social culture with someone. And for some people, it's more accessible to be online or on the phone, and that's their preferred method as well. So it can really vary on the person that is being supported.
So Isabelle, just give us a rundown of the services that this program provides.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are able to provide prompt suicide support for people who are queer and have thoughts and behaviours of suicide living in Melbourne. and they're able to, as Amy mentioned, self-refer online. Sometimes that referral might come through another organisation as well, and we can work alongside that person's other workers. And we want to ensure that people feel really at home with us. So we are not a hyper-clinical kind of service. We're a community service, and we provide that community care. So that extends to our groups program, which we run. That's currently online, but it may move back into being in person quite soon. And folks can also access a peer worker if they wish, and a psychologist or counsellor if they wish to.
Now, the program is very much targeted at the LGBTI community, who have, through research, lots more tendencies to have suicidal thoughts. How is the program tailored specifically to the LGBTI community?
So everyone who is a part of aftercare is part of the queer community. We also all have lived experience of thoughts of suicide ourselves. That extends to myself, that extends to our counsellors and psychologists. Everyone that you will meet as part of aftercare is part of community. And we think that that's something that is just so important, because there is a particular kind of solidarity and common shared knowledge that we have. So there's things that you don't necessarily have to explain. You're not put into the role of an educator when you're in the most acute crisis sometimes of people's lives.
And one of the things that obviously we're very aware of being in the queer community is that there are many of us that cover that diverse rainbow. Are there parts of that rainbow that you feel you need to have more specialist conversations with? Are there parts of the rainbow that you actually deal more with because they actually have a higher need for your services?
Yeah, I think that certainly for our trans and gender diverse communities, we get a lot of referrals from them, and that's reflected in the in statistics such as Private Lives 3, and research by LGBTI Health Australia has also found that around 35% of trans and gender diverse people aged over 18 reporting having attempted suicide at some point in their lives. So that's partly one of the reasons why we have peer workers who also identify as trans, non-binary, gender diverse, and we're able to match people up in the best way that we can to their experiences.
I mean, it's certainly great that your services were around, particularly when we were having that conversation pre the federal election, and the trans community were brought into conversations perhaps that were politicised for all the wrong reasons. So a great service there to provide. What about the age of your clients? Have you managed to adapt your services to those? Perhaps I'll talk to you about that in terms of the people you are actually talking to.
Yeah, so we have a really wide range of ages, which has been, I think, probably the most heartening thing to see in terms of the aftercare program. There is not a strict age limit in terms of who can access our aftercare program. Obviously, for the younger ones, we're looking at getting parent or guardian consent. But yeah, it's really interesting to see how the work that you're doing with someone can vary between, I guess, for someone that's their first time accessing a service and it's their first time experiencing suicidality or even exploring their gender or sexuality, and so that might become more forefront for some of the younger community, whereas for someone who is maybe part of the older community, we might be doing more linking in with the supports that are available for them as well. So, and yeah, again, being really flexible to what people need, and I really resonate with what Isabelle was saying there in terms of the power of peer and matching, like listening to what people's requests are. It's a really beautiful part of the aftercare program is people get to put in their requests for, what would really suit them for that. And we have an element of flexibility that can support that, which when you're experiencing a suicidal crisis, any element of being able to say what suits and what will support you the best is really powerful.
You are listening to Saturday Magazine with Paul and Fiona. We're talking to Isabelle McGovern and Amy Corcoran from Mind Australia. We are talking about suicide and suicide prevention. If any of the conversations we're having this morning are of concern to you, you can contact Mind on 1300 286 463 to get some advice and to talk to someone.
And also, of course, on the Joy website, we have, if you go to joy.org.au/support, there is a complete list of services that you can reach if you need to.
Now, we are here talking because you've got funding to go on for another period of time. What does that mean in practical terms, Isabelle?
It's meant that we are able to expand our team, and we've done so. We've had a brilliant bunch of new peer practitioners join us, which we're really grateful for. And we have fully relocated to the Abbotsford office as well. So that's also meant that our team is all together rather than across two sites. And we are able to continue visioning into the future. We're able to continue providing really important community care. I think that it takes a lot of trust in community to come to a service, and for us to be able to provide that continuity is really key.
Now, Mind Australia for this particular aftercare program is largely metropolitan Melbourne. I mean, if you were to if someone was to reach out to you from regional Victoria, you would still, I mean, what would be the process? You would then guide them to another service, or you would be able to then actually jump in and provide them with service as well?
We certainly wouldn't leave them in the lurch. Yeah. We would do what we can in order to provide some form of care that might look differently depending on the situation. But certainly I think that having tailored care for people who are in regional Victoria is really important, and something that I personally hope to see come out of the rollout of the Royal Commission funding version of hopefully a statewide aftercare.
Amy, you must have people you're dealing with in the digital space. So if someone from regional Victoria needed your support, would you just use digital technology to be able to offer that?
Yeah, and often that's what people are preferring as well. Some people will make travel in from regional if that's what they're preferring, but for some people it is just much more accessible to do digitally. And we're finding there's quite a big take up of both.
Now, interesting, I was thinking it's fantastic that you've received the funding and that the organisation can continue on and expand. Do you think to a certain extent it might be somewhat of a Band-Aid, and that there is broader issues in the health sector that need to be looked at as in better training for people, for care workers in more broadly to understand the needs of the community, of the LGBTIQA+ community?
I guess because aftercare has had a history now. We started with the Northwest Melbourne PHN as part of the National Suicide Prevention Trials. We have been able to provide community care for quite some time, so I wouldn't say it's a Band-Aid. However, I certainly agree that systemic change needs to happen. Again, we've seen training programs roll out as part of the Northwest Melbourne PHN trial, directed at emergency care workers and so on. So that happens, but educating an entire workforce takes a long time. It's a lot of unlearning that mainstream systems have to do. And so although that work has commenced in various ways, there is still a way to go. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's a great initiative. I think, people are very established in talking to a general practitioner about their physical health. People are not always fully conversant in terms of how they try and get to services for their mental health. And I think we know the way that Mind's approaching this is great, and suddenly extending it to the LGBTI team for the aftercare services you provide. Amy, I'm going to ask you another question. Working in this field can be distressing, I'm sure, and you probably have an awful lot of discussions. How do you as a practitioner talk to your peers about the things you go through with some of your clients, and how do you support yourself?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It's a really important part of being a peer practitioner and working in suicide prevention is being able to support yourself. it's also a really big strength of the aftercare model that everyone in the team does have that lived experience and has. So it really is working with peers and people who have been there and understood that before. And so for me, part of my support for myself is talking, and part of our team, we do a lot of talking and debriefing about how we're going in an open and honest and transparent way that you perhaps may not see in other organisations or other services, or really open and honest conversations that are responded to with support. And so for me, that's how we look after ourselves, is making sure it's that team cohesion and being honest, being honest with ourselves around where we are at and what we're experiencing.
I mean, and thank you, because I know you're doing some fantastic work, and I think the funding that's come through is recognition that not only is the service needed, but you're doing a great job delivering that service. And I think on behalf of all the listeners, I just want to say a very big thank you, because I think there will be a lot of people listening who probably don't realise that this service exists, and it's a great way of expanding that. But also, just a big thank you to you and your colleagues for putting this service together and just being there at the end of the phone line for those people who really need your help and support.
Absolutely. I think that some people feel like they are either too suicidal or not suicidal enough to receive care. And at Aftercare, we say, come in. We welcome you.
Now, again, if someone is feeling are mentally unwell and have thoughts of suicide, what advice would you give them to be able to access your services, and what do they need to do?
In terms of accessing our services, they can refer themselves through the website, which is I'll let Izzy reveal the website.
You can Google Mind Australia Aftercare LGBT, and that'll come up.
It's, just a really quick Google will bring us up. But I think something that I really want to say for anyone that is having thoughts of suicide or worried about themselves or someone else is the idea of pushing through that fear and reaching out for someone and not keeping it a secret. So it can be really scary to talk with someone, but at Aftercare we've all had that experience, and we know that it can be really overwhelming, and it's you can feel like you're the only one, and you're not the only one.
Yeah. So September the 10th, I believe, is National Suicide Awareness Day. What do you think are the intentions behind that particular initiative?
I think that World Suicide Awareness Day is about destigmatizing suicide. Certainly, we even in our language about suicide, we have previously said things like committed suicide, and suicide was against the law at one point. That's not true now at all. But that kind of criminalization or pathologization of suicide is very prevalent in our community. And I think it's important to raise awareness of suicide as part of destigmatizing and understanding that there are a lot of people who experience thoughts of suicide over the course of their lives. It's very common. And by being able to have those open and honest conversations and reach out is the first step in getting support and making a life worth living.
Well, we can't thank you guys enough for coming in and for letting the listeners know about the service and about, what the experience could be like if they wanted to or needed to engage. So we really thank you a lot. It's really meaningful for our listeners.
Thank you for having us here. It's really nice to have a chance to talk about what people can do in terms of supporting themselves or someone else, particularly when we're coming into a week that we'll have conversations around suicide. How people from the community can get some affirming support, I think, is really important.
And again, if this conversation has caused you any stress, please jump onto the Mind website. You can Google them, or you can call the Mind helpline, which was 1300 286. I've lost my piece of paper. 1-800-8. Sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, jump onto the Mind website and you can get the number and Google them straight away.
Yeah, there's also the suicide callback service, and Q Life is a really important one as well.
So I found it, 1300 286 463. Thank you ever so much, Isabelle McGovern and Amy Corcoran, for coming into us today for Mind Australia. And again, thanks for all the great work that you both do.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for listening to another Joy podcast, brought to you